I've been so moved by the death of Gene Hackman, and so
Mm,
um,
mm, yeah.
just the depth of Gene Hackman. It's like I knew Gene Hackman was great, and then this morning when I hear about his death, and I just start thinking about all the Gene Hackman movies that I've loved and enjoyed, and just thought, this guy, Al Pacino's my favorite actor of all time. Without question. There's no peer. But when I look at the body of work of Gene Hackman, Crimson Tide, oh God, I've watched that so many
Mm,
times. Hoosiers, great movie.
mm, yes.
Unforgiven, Little Bill Daggett. I mean, the French Connection's an all-time great movie. Uh, Enemy of the State with Will Smith. Get Short. I mean, it just goes on and on and on and on and on and on. So I'm gonna start with Gene Hackman, and I'm sorry, it's a bit of a curveball, but your thoughts and reflections on Gene Hackman, and where does he rank among the all time greats?
Well, Jason, it's really interesting. This is about 2, 3 years ago during the three knockdown rule. Mario Lopez and I were talking about this particular fighter who we said couldn't be in a bad fight. And he has about 10 to 15 fights that we'd rewatch. And we basically said it's like Gene Hackman in his movies. Whatever Gene Hackman is in is invariably a good movie. So we have a list of fighters that we say that's a Gene Hackman. And when I think of his era, and as I was preparing for this, there's a group of actors like him, Robert Duvall, Robert Redford, maybe like Paul Newman, Al Pacino, Robert De Niro, who, if they were in a movie, it had some credibility. And I'm talking about their prime as men before they started playing roles where they're the doddering old, especially a guy like De Niro, right? But you kind of knew that that movie was going to really focus on masculine leading men who are hard and tough. They weren't gonna play second fiddle to some sassy young girl that's gonna teach them lessons about life. No, no, no. They weren't doing any of that. It was from an era where you had leading men and it was about the men. And you came away after 2.5 hours thinking, okay, I had a good steak. Like you're satisfied. And I'll be honest with you, you're gonna be ashamed of me. I have actually never seen French Connection. I'm gonna have to do it now because it's one of those movies. When it came out, I was a young kid. I was more or less watching Bad News Bears over and over again. Got to admit that, Jason.
What is your favorite
Oh,
all-time Gene Hackman movie? Mine is Crimson Tide, and it's
right.
a tough. It's tough, but mine is Crimson Tide. I've seen that anytime it's on. I
Yeah,
watch Crimson Tide.
yeah.
I mean,
But
I don't know
Jason,
what it is about that submarine and Denzel Washington, and just that's my number one. And it's a tough. Unforgiven. I love that Western. I love Clint Eastwood, Little Bill Daggett, the villain in that. But Crimson Tide is my number one.
well, I think in the state of Alabama, the fact they did a roll tide in the beginning of that movie, that must be number one, at least in that state, right? But Jason, you know what it is for me, and they're going to replay it a lot now, given the fact we're close to March. Hoosiers. There's no doubt about it. Hoosiers, and I guarantee you, there have been about 1.5 million high school coaches the last 35 years that have tried to use that as a template. The way Norman Dale whipped the Hickory High team into shape, with or without Jimmy Chipwood. And I just read a story, Jason. I don't know if you heard this, but the director for that movie said that Gene Hackman was incredibly tough, that it actually was not a pleasant experience from day one, that he was actually Norman Dale. He was on him. He would berate him. He created tension. And that the whole day, it took 39 days to make that movie, the shooting. He said for 35, it was the most stressful period of his life. And he didn't even know if Gene Hackman was going to like the movie or not. And he was scared to death. And when Gene Hackman finally saw it, he never apologized to him. He just took off his glasses and he says, how the hell did you do that? That was his approval. Like, you did a good job. And you know what, Jason? I think that movie only grows in stature throughout the years.
It's funny that that's not my number one, having grown up in the state of
Yeah.
Indiana, knowing the history of the Milan basketball team, the real life. I
Yeah.
believe Bobby Plump and the Milan from a little
Yeah.
small town. It was based on a real life incident, or somewhat based on a real life deal in this historic in Indiana high school basketball history. And there was nobody at one time that knew more about Indiana high school basketball than yours truly as a kid. I mean, it was Indiana's one class basketball tournament
Yeah.
was the greatest thing in sports for me as a kid, and they've ruined it. Now they got classifications, and it used to be the small schools, and that's why what made the Milan story and the Hickory story so great is they would take on the big city schools that allegedly had more talent. And I mean, Hoosiers is an awesome movie. I just happen to like Crimson Tide more and just find it more rewatchable. And maybe it's because you throw Denzel into there because I'm right. It was Denzel and Gene Hackman.
Well,
That's an incredible movie.
did we mention Mississippi Burning? That's another classic Hackman film. But here's the one, and I want to go against the grain. In my top 5, and again, I've not seen as many Hackman movies as you have, but I thought he brought great life, character, and humor to this character, and it worked. Him as Lex Luthor in Superman. Because, I don't really watch a lot of these movies that have to do with
I don't
comic
watch
strips.
it. Yeah.
I don't watch any of the
Go
modern
ahead.
ones.
I'm sorry.
But when the original Superman came out, I believe in 1979 and 1980 with Christopher Reeves, the movies actually I thought were much closer to the comic books than they are now. I think a lot of these movies now are so dark. They go down different places psychologically, and it's not fun. When he played Lex Luthor, I thought it was hilarious. He actually came off like a lovable rogue. Like, I'm not saying you rooted for him against Superman and the rest of the world, but when he's trying to take over the world and all this other, you kind of laughed at the thing. You're thinking, okay, you know what? He's not such a bad guy except for all the criminality he does. So I would actually say that is one of my favorite roles that Gene Hackman ever played.
I'm gonna go back and make one more Crimson Tide reference because the other part of Crimson Tide that I love, being a big fan of the TV show The Sopranos, is the young James Gandolfini was in Crimson Tide.
Yes.
This is before he was Tony Soprano, and I just love watching that movie and seeing Gandolfini in a different role than Tony Soprano. Steve, are you an Unforgiven person? Did you see Clint Eastwood?
No.
Are you a little bit? Oh my God!
I know. I need to binge this weekend.
Whoa! You don't watch? Are you West? Do you like westerns?
Not really. No, I really don't. I really don't. If you actually saw my Mount Rushmore of favorite films, you would not take me seriously as a serious person. I mean, basically, my Mount Rushmore movie is the original Bad News Bears. Okay. Morris v. Buttermilk.
I got no problem with that.
That's a classic. Walter Matthau was unbelievable.
Yeah.
Karate Kid. Hey, I'm Asian. They had Pat Morita.
Got a problem. I got a problem with that, but go ahead.
This one you're going to gung ho. Prime Michael Keaton. I actually rewatched that about a month ago. Outside of that, I thought it ran great. My 4th movie might be North Dallas 40. I thought the greatest football movie of the 70s. I thought it told the truth, pulled back the curtain on exactly what pro football really was.
No problem with that. Let me ask you this though. North Dallas 40, what's your thoughts on Brian's song? That's
Brian's
one of the great.
It's a tearjerker. It's a tearjerker.
Yeah.
It is. It's a tearjerker. Billy D. Williams and a young James Caan. Look, every man can admit you cry 2 things: death of your parents, Brian's song. It's a great football movie, but it's a story of 2 men and a relationship. There's a racial element. I think it's great. But North Dallas 40, it's such a hard look at the harshness of pro football and what a brutal world it can be. And it's actually based on a book by Peter Gent, former Dallas Cowboy. And it had the greatest line that I think has encapsulated my philosophy on sports and what it really is. It's when Nick Nolte is getting run out of the team, and he says to, I think, the owner or one of the coaches, no, it was the former player, John Matuzak, tells the coach after that big game loss, every time you call it a game, you say it's a business. And every time I say it's a business, you say it's just a game. I need feeling, man. And that just opened up my eyes like, wow. Sometimes they call it a business. Sometimes they call it a game when it's convenient. And I think that's the truest line that's ever been uttered in any sports film.
Listening to your list of movies, and it's just people's personalities clearly are different. And just you like to watch a movie with a smile on your face, clearly.
Yeah.
You like to laugh. That's your deal. And I do too. And it's like, that's, I love Fast Times at Ridgemont High. I love Porky's from our childhood. I love Anchorman. But I like gritty, super macho movies. Don't miss a second of Fearless. Hit that like button and subscribe to keep up with our latest content.